Before the world learned to scream for the Beatles, it was the women who taught rock how to seduce. They weren't just muses or backup singers, they were storms disguised as smiles. They walked onto stages run by men, armed with nothing but eyeliner, defiance, and a voice that could break your heart before the first chorus. This is the story of the women who made rock dangerous, the ones who changed the decade and paid the price for it.
You keep saying you got something for me.
The 1960s promised freedom, but freedom looked different depending on who you were. For Nancy Sinatra, it meant stepping out from her father's shadow in thigh-high boots, smirking at the idea that women had to play nice. Her voice was coy but commanding, a perfect disguise for rebellion. She wasn't begging for love. She was telling you she could walk away and never look back. When she sang, "These boots are made for walking,"
And you keep losing when you ought to not bet.
it wasn't just a pop song. It was a declaration. She wasn't anyone's daughter, anyone's girlfriend, or anyone's pretty accessory. She was her own revolution wrapped in leather and confidence. On stage, she didn't need to shout. She just raised an eyebrow, and the message was clear. Women could be sexy and in control. Nancy's image, the boots, the bangs, the wink, became a symbol of independence in miniskirt form. Every step she took in those boots left a mark on pop culture, echoing far beyond the radio charts. Behind the flirtation, she was making history. The first female pop singer to weaponize attitude, turning charm into power and setting the stage for every unapologetic woman who came after her. If Nancy was the tease, Grace Slick was the confrontation. With Jefferson Airplane, she led an acid-drenched generation straight into the rabbit hole and never apologized for it. Grace didn't smile sweetly on stage. She glared. She snarled. She sang like she was casting a spell, every note dripping with defiance. She wasn't there to please anyone. She was there to challenge them, to make them question what they thought rock should sound like or what a woman should look like while performing it. In a time when women were told to be pleasant, Grace was psychedelic fury and eyeliner and leather. Her voice had the power of a preacher and the edge of a protest, turning every lyric into a revolution. She didn't just sing rock, she embodied it. She was chaos wrapped in poise, danger dressed in velvet. And at Woodstock, with 500,000 people tripping under the summer sky, her voice became the collective pulse of a generation trying to wake up, a battle cry disguised as a lullaby. Grace Slick wasn't the girl next door. She was the warning label on the American dream, and she wore that role proudly. Then there was Marianne Faithfull, the angel who floated into London's rock scene and slowly descended into its chaos. At 17, she sang songs written by the Rolling Stones and became their muse, and eventually Mick Jagger's lover. But the tabloids weren't kind to angels. The same press that once praised her voice soon turned on her the moment she stopped fitting their picture of innocence. When police raided a party in 1967 and found Marianne wrapped in a fur rug, she became the tabloids' favorite target, a scandal, a symbol, a warning. Overnight, the girl who'd once embodied swinging London became the cautionary tale of it. They painted her as everything wrong with freedom, too wild, too open, too unashamed. But Marianne never apologized for being alive. The same fire that burned her also forged her. She lost her fame, her fortune, and nearly her life, but she kept her defiance. Years later, she returned to music with the voice of someone who'd seen heaven and hell and survived them both. She rose again, harder, wiser, and utterly unrepentant. Marianne's story became an anthem for every woman who refused to stay broken. While London burned with scandal, America had its own rising flame. Tina Turner didn't enter rock and roll. She detonated into it. Her voice was a weapon, her legs were legend, and her stage presence made entire bands look like backup dancers. She moved like lightning, her body and her voice perfectly synced in a kind of beautiful chaos. Every performance felt like an exorcism, pain and power colliding under the spotlight. But behind the glitter and sweat was violence. Her husband and bandmate, Ike Turner, controlled everything: the music, the money, and the bruises. Offstage, she was silenced and stripped of power. On stage, she reclaimed it every night. Tina's story became the great paradox of rock itself. How someone so powerful could still be trapped by the very system that made her famous. Yet even in her darkest years, when she sang, the audience saw only fire. They didn't realize they were witnessing survival disguised as performance. A woman using the stage as her battlefield. Every scream, every spin, every flash of those famous legs was defiance set to rhythm. Tina Turner didn't just sing rock and roll, she was rock and roll.
Here she comes. You better watch your step.
While Tina ruled the stage, another kind of queen emerged from the shadows of New York's art scene. Nico, tall, blonde, and impossibly distant, was the voice of the Velvet Underground's most haunting songs. She wasn't the kind of woman who sought your attention. She commanded it by doing nothing at all. Andy Warhol called her a masterpiece. Lou Reed called her trouble. Her deep monotone delivery wasn't about seduction, it was about control. Every word she sang felt detached, cold, and deliberate, like she was standing above the noise of the world, watching it all burn. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Nico wasn't there to charm you. She was there to unsettle you, to make you listen differently. And somehow, that distance became magnetic. She turned silence into power. But behind that cool exterior was profound loneliness. Fame had turned her into an icon, and then abandoned her. She drifted through decades of addiction, exile, and fading spotlight. A ghost haunting her own legend. When she died in 1988 after a bicycle accident in Ibiza, the world realized she hadn't just sung about tragedy, she had lived it, beautifully and brutally. In the mid-60s, while the rock world shouted louder, Dusty Springfield whispered with soul. Her blonde beehive and smoky eyeliner screamed glamour, but her voice, that aching, gospel-soaked cry, came from somewhere raw and real. Dusty didn't need volume to be heard. She could break your heart with a single breath. Behind the studio polish was a woman waging a quiet war with herself. In an era that refused to accept her queerness, Dusty hid in plain sight, turning her secrets into songs. Every lyric carried the weight of longing. Every note felt like a confession whispered through a microphone. She once said, "I'm the happiest when I'm sad," and that paradox became her truth. She lived in that space between joy and sorrow, between who she was and who the world would allow her to be. And somehow, from that struggle, she created something timeless. Melancholy wrapped in velvet, pain disguised as beauty. Dusty Springfield wasn't just a singer of heartbreak. She was heartbreak. Her music remains the sound of a soul trying to find peace in a world that never made room for her light to fully shine. While British rock was rebelling, Motown was perfecting, and at the center of it all stood Diana Ross, elegance weaponized. She wasn't raw like Janis or reckless like Grace. She was immaculate. Every gesture, every note, every glance felt deliberate, refined, and magnetic. Diana didn't need chaos to command a room. She did it with poise. In a decade defined by rebellion, she was the revolution you couldn't see coming. A black woman radiating confidence, sophistication, and control in an industry built to shut her out. Diana became the dream America wanted to believe in. The glamorous superstar who could conquer the mainstream and make it look effortless. But perfection comes at a cost. Behind the glittering gowns and perfect harmonies, the Supremes began to fracture under the weight of her success. The spotlight that crowned her also isolated her. The higher she climbed, the thinner the air became. Still, she never stumbled. On stage, she was untouchable, a mirror reflecting everything the world wished it could be. Diana Ross didn't just redefine what it meant to be a frontwoman. She redefined power itself, not through rebellion, but through grace sharpened into steel.
This man I ever wanted and I ever needed. Oh, but it didn't. I'll give you a...
If Diana Ross was control, Janis Joplin was chaos. She didn't perform. She detonated. Every time she stepped on stage, it felt like she was setting herself on fire, and the audience came to watch the blaze. Her raspy roar tore through every crowd she faced, breaking through the clean, polished sound of her era. Janis wasn't conventionally glamorous. She didn't glide across the stage in sequins or try to be pretty for the cameras. She sweated, screamed, and bared her soul. She didn't care about the right notes or the right look. She cared about truth. When Janis sang, the world stopped pretending. There was no image, no filter, no mask, just raw, terrifying honesty. Born in Port Arthur, Texas, she'd been an outcast long before she was a star. She fled to San Francisco and found her tribe among the freaks, poets, and rockers of Haight-Ashbury, with Big Brother and the Holding Company. She turned songs like Piece of My Heart and Ball and Chain into spiritual exorcisms. Her voice could shatter glass and then soothe you in the same breath. But she lived like her voice, too loud, too bright, too fast. The same wild energy that made her electric also made her fragile. Her addictions chased her from stage to stage, and by 1970, at just 27 years old, she was gone. Another casualty of the decade's endless push for more. Yet her ghost never left the stage. You can still hear her in every woman who refuses to sing quietly, in every artist who trades perfection for passion. Janis Joplin didn't just sing rock and roll. She became it. Messy, defiant, beautiful, and free. Not all legends held guitars. Some inspired the songs that changed the world. Pattie Boyd was a model, a muse, and the quiet epicenter of rock's most complicated love triangle. She married George Harrison, who wrote Something for her, one of the Beatles' most beautiful love songs. Years later, Eric Clapton fell in love with her, writing Layla in despair. Two of the greatest love songs of all time, both about one woman. But Pattie wasn't just a muse. She was the symbol of a generation where love, art, and fame blurred into chaos. She once said she felt like a prize being passed between men. Yet even in silence, she became immortal, her face frozen in the soundtrack of the decade. They called them divas, temptresses, angels, bitches, and muses. Anything but what they truly were, artists. The 60s promised liberation, but for these women, freedom always came with a catch. They could sing louder, dress bolder, love who they wanted, but only if they smiled through the fallout. And yet they changed everything. Because while the men of rock built empires, the women gave it its soul. They didn't just make rock sexy, they made it human. Half a century later, their voices still echo. Not perfect, not polished, but unforgettable. They weren't here to be safe. They were here to feel. And in the process, they became something far more powerful than beautiful. They became eternal.